On Wednesday, China held one of its largest ever military parades, with the country's leader Xi Jinping joined by North Korea leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a show of defiance against the West. It's the first time in 66 years that the leaders from the three countries appeared all together. Also in Beijing, Kim and Putin reaffirmed Pyongyang mascot ties through their military cooperation. Putin thanked Kim for backing his war against Ukraine, which Kim called a brother's duty. The number of those who tied their knots in South Korea has been cut in half over the past 3 decades, while marriages involving foreigners more than doubled during the same period. We begin in China tonight. North Korea's Kim Jong-un and Russia's Vladimir Putin stood shoulder to shoulder with China's Xi Jinping at a mass military parade in Beijing to show off their united stance against the West. Our Shin Ha-young reports.
A military parade marking China's 80th Victory Day anniversary became the stage for the leaders of North Korea, China, and Russia to appear together for the first time in 66 years. The 70-minute-long celebration kicked off on Wednesday at 9 a.m. local time in Tiananmen Square, Beijing. About an hour before the official ceremony, around 25 world leaders began arriving at the venue, walking down a red carpet. Chinese President Xi Jinping greeted them, with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un entering just before Russian President Vladimir Putin, who was the last to arrive. Symbolic moments of solidarity among Pyongyang, Beijing, and Moscow continued throughout the event. With Xi in the center, Kim on his left, and Putin on his right, the three leaders walked up to the rostrum side by side, conversing with smiles. China marks September 3, 1945 as the day of its victory over Japan and the end of World War II. That's the day after Japan signed its unconditional surrender to China and the other allies.
History warns us that the destiny of humankind is closely interconnected. Only when nations and peoples treat each other as equals, live together in harmony, and support one another can we safeguard common security and eliminate the root causes of war. We must not allow the tragedies of history to repeat themselves.
During the military parade, China showcased strategic weapons for the first time, including the F-H-97 unmanned combat aircraft and the DF-61 intercontinental ballistic missile, reportedly an upgrade from the DF-41. A record 40,000 people took part in the parade, with 45 military units also marching through Tiananmen Square to display their strength. Meanwhile, from South Korea, National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik attended the parade. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
So North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has made his debut at this multilateral event, which experts view as a sharp change in his approach to diplomacy. He also made time to sit down with Russia's Putin. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young has more.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appeared to launch a new style of active diplomacy at China's Victory Day parade, seeking to establish Pyongyang's nuclear status in a coalition with Beijing and Moscow. Center stage throughout the official events in Tiananmen Square, Kim constantly stood and was seated at the side of Chinese President Xi Jinping, with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the other side. Amid geopolitical tensions, the gathering of leaders from the three sides was a display of unity last seen 66 years ago in the Cold War era.
It seems intended to demonstrate the strengthening of North Korea and China's socialist solidarity as a form of counterbalance to the South Korea-US-Japan trilateral framework. Another aspect for Chairman Kim is to show he plays a key role within the North Korea-China-Russia alignment.
For Kim Jong-un, the optics could portray North Korea as part of a trio of nuclear powers as he continues to seek recognition of Pyongyang as a nuclear state. Further showcasing their alignment, Kim and Putin held a bilateral summit on the sidelines following Wednesday's Victory Day events. Putin thanked Kim for deploying North Korean troops to aid Russia's war in Ukraine, which he described as a battle against neo-Nazism, while Kim responded that Pyongyang would do whatever it takes to support the Kremlin. The meeting between the two stretched on for 2.5 hours, during which Putin invited Kim to visit Russia. Kim's trip to Beijing also reaffirms the North's relations with China, but a formal trilateral summit between Kim, Xi and Putin is highly unlikely in the foreseeable future, according to experts, as the three sides are pursuing different strategic priorities.
Before a summit takes place, the agenda, the accompanying officials, and their positions on how the international community will respond must be closely aligned. Yet, their coalition can be likened to being in the same bed with different dreams. Also, there hasn't been enough time for preparations in terms of the agenda and lineup.
Kim arrived in Beijing on Tuesday by special train, his first visit in 6 years. What was more striking upon arrival was the unexpected appearance of Kim's daughter Kim Jue, seen standing directly behind her father when greeted by high-level Chinese officials.
When Kim Jong-un turned 8 years old, his father tapped him as his successor. However, as he was not given sufficient diplomatic training, he remained a leader of an isolated state until he participated in the summits with China, South Korea, and the United States in 2018. Determined not to pass down this unfortunate experience to his daughter, Kim Jong-un seems to have brought her to China, firmly resolved to introduce her early onto the diplomatic stage and provide her with systematic training.
The occasion marks Kim's first participation in a gathering of dozens of world leaders, a notable departure from the one-on-one summits that have defined his diplomacy so far. Kim also shook hands with South Korea's National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik during the parade and exchanged a brief conversation, according to the Speaker's office. The implications for inter-Korean and US-North Korea diplomacy remain uncertain. Observers say Kim might consult Xi about a potential summit with US President Donald Trump. Still, Seoul officials have cautioned against premature optimism, saying that Pyongyang has shown no signs of abandoning its nuclear program. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And China's Victory Day was more than a military parade, experts say. Rather, the event may have been strategically designed to serve President Xi's objectives. For more, we turn to our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung here in the studio with us. Welcome, Bo-kyung.
Tommy, thank you for having me.
So, Bo-kyung, why don't we start with some of the scenes from the military parade? The way that President Xi positioned each leaders or representatives from the invited countries, what does that suggest?
Right. So one of the main talking points of the military parade was how so-called three strong men, Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un all stood together next to each other. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was positioned to Xi's left, while Russian President Vladimir Putin was standing on the right. Xi maintained this formation, standing side by side at the rostrum as well. Kim standing directly to the left of President Xi represents China's intentional gesture of exceptional courtesy toward North Korea. This is actually an unprecedented scene in North Korean history as well, as neither his grandfather Kim Il-sung nor his father Kim Jong-il ever stood directly beside a Chinese president at such a multilateral venue. In fact, if we compare it with the 70th anniversary of Victory Day in 2015, North Korea sent Workers' Party Secretary Choi Ryong-hae, who was positioned at the far end of the rostrum. One expert says the seating arrangement itself shows China's own message.
The fact that Kim was positioned on the left shows China has offered great level of courtesy, and it shows that China would be behind North Korea's back in various ongoing matters. This can be understood as diplomatic protocol, created through seating arrangements, where both sides had a previous mutual agreement.
So these seating arrangements were no random at all. Now, Bo-kyung, this is all part of President Xi's plan to, redesign this international order, isn't it?
Right. So though our focus today is the Victory Day military parade, we need to note that the message President Xi Jinping was trying to share with the world actually comes from the Shanghai Cooperation organization as well, which took place ahead of the Victory Day.
Right.
There, he explicitly put the idea of creating a China-led growth model that goes against the Western ones. Also, during his speech on Victory Day, he said the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is unstoppable, and indirectly suggested that this is already happening by showcasing a wide range of weaponry. One of the most interesting shots was how Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi joined the SCO and joined hands with Xi. Such a scene between Modi and Xi standing together like old friends was hard to imagine, as the two countries had been in a hostile military standoff since 2020, with China's troop incursions into the mountainous Himalayan border with India. However, with Trump having slapped India with 50% import tariffs, this made Modi visit China for the first time in 7 years to show intimacy with Xi. Though Modi skipped the military parade, the same expert says the fact Modi visited China itself would be quite painful for the U.S. to see.
Modi's tightrope diplomacy for national interests, needing Russian oil, having thorny issues with China, but still meeting with Xi to discuss various forms of cooperation, and continuously sending messages opposing U.S.-led unilateralism would be very uncomfortable for Trump.
That is why there was a strong reaction from Trump ahead of the military parade. Bo-kyung, lastly, let's talk about this military parade. Of course, it's no military parade without weaponry. Now, it was more grand than ever, wasn't it?
Right. China showed off a wide range of weaponry at the military parade, as you said, that could make Washington really worry. It debuted the new type Dongfeng, or DF-5C, liquid-fueled intercontinental strategic nuclear missile. One expert said in the Global Times that it has an estimated range of more than 20,000 kilometers, being capable of reaching anywhere on the entire globe. Also shown was the DF-26D, a medium-range ballistic missile nicknamed the Guam Killer, which can directly strike the U.S. military's key hub on Guam. Hypersonic DF-17 missiles, which are capable of neutralizing THAAD systems, and the DF-61, presumed to be a next-generation ICBM, were also included in the parade. The Yingji-21, or so-called YJ-21, a hypersonic anti-ship missile, and the Hongqi HQ-29 interceptor missile, referred to as the Chinese version of the Patriot, were also showcased. Now, fighter jets, including the J-35A, a stealth fighter that made its debut as a counterpart to the U.S. Navy's F-35C, showed the modernization of China's military as well.
All right, Bo-kyung, thanks for that coverage. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
President Lee Jae-myung is set to become the first South Korean leader to preside over a UN Security Council meeting, as South Korea assumes the presidency of the 50-member body this month. Seoul's Foreign Ministry says the president will chair an open debate on Wednesday, September 24th in New York, on the implications of AI on peace and stability. Now, ahead of this event, on September 9th, Seoul will convene a separate debate on UN peace operations, as this month the Council also deliberates on the conflicts in the Middle East. Seoul plans to further highlight women, peace and security, as well as the link between climate and conflict. President Lee will hold his second press conference next Thursday to mark his 100 days in office. A senior secretary for Public Relations and Communications, Lee Gi-yeon, said on Wednesday that the 90-minute event will bring together some 150 domestic and foreign journalists. Exact time and venue will be announced at a later date. And just like the president's first press conference in early July, the Q&A session will be divided into 3 categories: the economy, politics and foreign affairs, and society and culture. This is the first time a South Korean president will face the press twice in his first 100 days. In other news, South Korea's economy registered a rebound of 0.7% in the second quarter, exceeding initial forecasts. Now, strong exports and boosted private spending were behind the growth. Our correspondent Moon Jung reports.
South Korea's economy grew faster than earlier estimated in the second quarter, driven by robust exports and improved private consumption. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Wednesday revealed that the nation's real gross domestic product, a key economic indicator, grew by 0.7% quarter-on-quarter in the April to June period this year. This revised figure marks an improvement of 0.1 percentage point from the advanced estimate made in July. The growth also represents a significant rebound from a contraction experienced in the first quarter. Last week, the central bank upgraded its economic growth forecast for this year to 0.9%, up from its previous projection of 0.8%.
If the economy grows around 0.6% on quarter in the second half, we will be able to achieve 0.9% annual growth.
Breaking down the growth drivers, private spending saw a 0.5% increase, largely due to higher spending on automobiles and health services. Government expenditure also climbed 1.2%, boosted by increased healthcare benefits. However, construction investment contracted, primarily driven by a decrease in civil engineering projects. Facilities investment also declined due to reduced demand for ships and semiconductor manufacturing equipment. In terms of trade, exports surged by 4.5%, spurred by strong global demand for semiconductors and petroleum and chemical products. Imports were also up by 4.2%.
We expect domestic demand to continue its modest recovery, led by the government's supplementary budget execution and better consumer sentiment. However, while exports showed a favorable trend in July and August, we anticipate growth to gradually slow as the impact of U.S. tariff impositions expands.
Meanwhile, the country's gross national income saw a 2% increase, with real GNI growing by 1%. This was largely due to improved terms of trade, which led to a reduction in real trade losses. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korea has gone through a dramatic drop in demographics over the past 3 decades, in both the number of newlyweds and newborns. Park Jun-an has the details.
The number of marriages in South Korea has almost halved over the past 30 years, sounding the alarm on the severity of the population crisis already underway. Statistics Korea released a report on Wednesday called Changes in Marriage and Birth Rates in Korea over the past 30 years. According to the data, marriages peaked at 435,000 in 1996, but fell steadily to a record low of 192,000 in 2022, before modest rebounds to 194,000 in 2023 and 222,000 in 2024. This is an over 44% decline from nearly 400,000 back in 1995. The number of marriages with foreign spouses in South Korea, however, surged some 54%, rising from 13,500 in 1995 to 20,800 in 2024. As of 2024, marriages with foreign spouses account for 9.3% of all unions. The average age at first marriage has also sharply climbed. From 28.4 years old for men and 25.3 years old for women in 1995, the average age at first marriage rose to 33.9 for men and 31.6 for women in 2024. This is up 5.5 and 6.2 years respectively. Births over the past 30 years have declined even more sharply. From 715,000 in 1995 to 238,000 in 2024, it saw a drop of over 66% after bottoming at 230,000 in 2023. A senior researcher at the Population Policy Research Center claimed that the continuous decline in South Korea's young population will shrink the country's overall societal structure, leading to crises.
The situation can be summed up in 3 points: a shrinking young population, an aging society, and rising political conflicts driven by growing disparities. If this continues, more people will inevitably flock to the metropolitan area, while regional areas face not only a population decline, but also a drop in the quality of human resources, making recovery extremely difficult. We are now at a critical juncture that calls for decisive political action.
Looking at changes in the total fertility rate among OECD countries from 1995 to 2023, South Korea is now the only country where it has fallen by more than 50%, sounding a serious alarm for the nation's future sustainability. 박준환, Arirang News.
And just when we thought we are ready to welcome back cooler weather, the good old Seoul Fashion Week is back for its 2026 spring-summer season. Our Park Hyubin has a glimpse of the latest styles.
Fashion, stars, and a runway by the palace walls. Seoul Fashion Week is back for its 2026 spring-summer season, offering a glimpse of the trends that will shape styles in the coming year. Marking its 25th anniversary, this year's event goes beyond the traditional venue at Dongdaemun Design Plaza, spreading across the entire city of Seoul. And the week began right here along the stone walls of Deoksugung Palace with a striking opening show by Anderson Bell.
I've always followed Anderson Bell, and since the show is held here along the Deoksugung Palace walls, I was really excited to come.
I've been attending the event for about 3 or 4 years now. I didn't want to miss it this time either. The runway today is what I'm looking forward to most, especially because it's a brand I've always liked.
Before the runway began, the area around the palace was already filled with stars and fans alike. On the photo wall being names like Tomorrow by Together's Hyunin Kai, Hearts to Hearts Ian and Tsiu, and IVE's Gaeul drew the crowds. Once the opening runway show kicked off, Anderson Bell unveiled its 2026 spring-summer collection under the theme Surfed Clash. The pieces highlighted unexpected color matches, layered silhouettes that looked effortless yet calculated, and deconstructed details with a worn-in edge. And Deoksugung Palace is not the only iconic location to serve as a backdrop. Throughout the week, 27 Korean designer brands take turns presenting their collections at Seoul landmarks, including the Oil Tank Culture Park, Heungcheonsa Temple, and of course, Dongdaemun Design Plaza. Adding a global touch, Berlin Fashion Week also joined Seoul Fashion Week for the first time, showcasing its official Berlin showroom.
The event runs until this Sunday, turning Seoul into a global fashion city. Park Hyubin, Arirang News.
Netflix sensation K-pop Demon Hunters has become the most watched title on the platform. According to the streaming service, the animation has been streamed over 266 million times, and making it the top content of all time on Netflix. In fact, it surpassed Squid Game Season 1, which previously held the top spot in the show category. Meanwhile, its original soundtrack Golden continues to dominate the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 chart, holding the #1 spot for the third straight week.
It's getting a little cooler in the morning and evening, but the daytime heat is still raging. Most areas exceeded 30 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day today, but the East Coast, where easterly winds are blowing, stayed below 30 degrees and felt relatively cooler. Showers will pass throughout the southern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and southern parts of the Chungcheong-do provinces until tonight. The expected amount of rain is around 5 to 60 millimeters. Tomorrow there will be rain in the center areas and showers in the south again. Tomorrow Seoul, Daejeon, Gwangju, and Daegu will start off at 24 degrees. Highs will only rise to 29 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju, and Jeju at around 32 degrees. Throughout this week, frequent showers are expected across the country. From Saturday afternoon, rain is forecast again. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.